Chapter 1. The breakup, the list, and the challenge begins. The poached eggs were perfect. Aiden had always loved this cafe, with its sun-drenched windows and the faint scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. It had been their place for years, his and Julian's. But today, everything tasted like cardboard. Julian sat across from him, elegant as ever, stirring his coffee with deliberate care. His blonde hair was neatly styled, his perfectly pressed blazer unwrinkled despite the late morning heat. He looked unbothered, which was the first sign something was terribly, terribly wrong. Aiden had known Julian long enough to recognize the warning signs, the too careful posture, the way he avoided meeting Aiden's eyes directly. And then, without ceremony, Julian set his coffee spoon down and sighed. "I think we should break up." Aiden blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Julian exhaled like he was discussing a business deal, not detonating their 4-year relationship over overpriced eggs and espresso. "We've been stagnating, Aiden. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think it's for the best." "Stagnating?" Aiden stared at him, his chest tightening. He felt his breath catch, but he refused to let his voice waver. "This is the first I'm hearing about any of this. A while? You've been planning this?" Julian gave a small, patronizing smile, the kind Aiden had grown to loathe. "I didn't want to blindside you." Aiden almost laughed. Wasn't that exactly what he was doing? Julian reached into his sleek leather bag and pulled out a small envelope. He slid it across the table with the same calm detachment as a bank teller handing over a receipt. Aiden hesitated before picking it up. The envelope was heavier than he expected. Inside he found a folded piece of paper, smooth and uncreased, meaning Julian had written this well in advance. "Things you could never do right." The words hit him like a slap. Julian took a dainty sip of his coffee, watching Aiden's reaction with the faintest flicker of interest. "I thought it might help give you some clarity," he said. Aiden's throat tightened. "You made a fucking list?" Julian tilted his head. "It's constructive." Aiden wanted to shove the entire table over. His hands clenched the paper so tightly it nearly crumpled, but he forced himself to stay calm. Unbelievable. He was aware of the curious glances from nearby tables, but Julian remained composed, as if he was the reasonable one. "You never took initiative, Aiden. You never stepped out of your comfort zone. You never knew how to take a risk." Julian's voice was smooth, clinical. "I loved you, but love isn't enough when there's no growth." Aiden swallowed the lump in his throat. He wanted to argue, to throw the damn list in Julian's face. But suddenly, he realized something. Julian had made up his mind long before this conversation even happened. And worse, Aiden had let him make him feel small for years. He slid the envelope back across the table, standing up so abruptly that his chair scraped against the floor. Julian barely reacted. "I hope you choke on your fucking espresso," Aiden said, voice steady, and then he walked out. Aiden wasn't proud of the fact that he spent the next 2 days in bed staring at the ceiling while Liv banged on his door. "Aiden, open up before I break in." Liv was not a subtle person. She was all wild, untamed energy, short, sharp auburn bob, oversized overalls splattered with paint, and a glare that could reduce most men to rubble. She was also Aiden's best friend, and unfortunately had a spare key. When he didn't answer, she let herself in and dropped a bag of takeout onto his stomach. "I'm staging an intervention." Aiden groaned. "Not now, Liv." "Yes, now." She plopped onto his bed, making herself comfortable. "I'm assuming you've been rereading the list like a tragic little Victorian ghost?" "I am not a Victorian ghost," Aiden muttered, shoving the paper further under his pillow. Liv rolled her eyes and yanked it out, unfolding it dramatically. "Let's see. You could never be spontaneous. You were a terrible dancer. You didn't take enough risks. You were too afraid to try new things." She scoffed. "God, what a tool! Who even writes a breakup list?" Aiden groaned, covering his face with a pillow. "I know, it's humiliating." Liv, however, was grinning. "No, this is great." Aiden peeked out. "How exactly?" She smirked. "Because you're going to do every single thing on this list, and you're going to do them better than he ever thought you could." Aiden opened his mouth to protest, but something in his chest shifted. Could he? Wouldn't it be satisfying? To prove, no, not to Julian, but to himself, that he could be everything Julian said he wasn't? Slowly, he sat up. "You're serious?" Liv grinned. "Deadly." Aiden's first mistake was thinking he could carry a 3-foot-tall potted plant up 4 flights of stairs by himself. It was heavy, unwieldy, and worst of all, it kept slipping in his grasp as he tried to wedge it through the apartment hallway, which was precisely the moment Malcolm appeared. "Need help?" Aiden nearly lost his grip entirely. He twisted to find the hottest man he'd ever seen leaning casually in the doorway of the neighboring apartment. Malcolm was tall. Broad shoulders, a strong jawline lined with the faintest hint of stubble, and dark, knowing eyes that flickered with amusement. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms Aiden refused to be distracted by. "I'm fine," Aiden grunted, shifting his grip. The plant lurched dangerously to the left. Malcolm raised a brow. "Right." The plant almost tipped over, but Malcolm stepped in, catching it effortlessly. Aiden exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Okay, maybe I need help." Malcolm chuckled, lifting the plant like it weighed nothing. "Good to know you're not stubborn." Aiden didn't miss the teasing edge in his voice. "You must be new," he said, huffing as he followed Malcolm into his apartment. "Moved in last week," Malcolm confirmed, setting the plant down. "Malcolm." "Aiden." Their hands brushed as Malcolm straightened, and Aiden definitely did not notice the warmth lingering there. "So," Malcolm mused, eyes twinkling, "what's with the plant?" Aiden hesitated. Then, against his better judgment, he admitted, "It's part of a revenge list." Malcolm blinked. "Come again?" Aiden crossed his arms. "It's a personal growth list, really." Malcolm smirked. "Right? And this helps?" Aiden squared his shoulders. "Yes." Malcolm nodded, clearly amused but not mocking. "Well, in that case, good luck." Aiden watched as Malcolm left, something stirring in his chest. Something about Malcolm, his confidence, his ease, felt different. And for the first time since that disastrous brunch, Aiden felt something other than heartache. Something like possibility. Chapter 2. Dancing, Disaster, and the Art of Letting Go. Aiden was fully prepared for humiliation. Standing in the middle of a sunlit dance studio surrounded by couples who moved with effortless grace, he felt like a fish thrown onto land. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors didn't do much to help. His arms were awkwardly positioned, his stance was stiff, and he had no idea what to do with his feet. "This was a terrible idea," he muttered under his breath. The instructor, a lively woman named Bianca, clapped her hands. "All right, everyone. Let's go over the basic steps again." She glided across the floor with her assistant, moving so fluidly it looked easy. It was not easy. Aiden focused, trying to mirror their steps, but somehow ended up stepping on his own foot instead. His partner, an older woman named Marjorie, chuckled kindly. "Relax, dear. You look like you're bracing for an attack." Aiden forced a tight smile. Julian's words haunted the back of his mind. "You're a terrible dancer." He inhaled, exhaled, and stepped forward again. He immediately collided with Marjorie's foot. By the end of the session, Aiden's pride was in tatters. Bianca approached him as the other students filtered out. "You're holding too much tension in your body," she observed. "Dancing isn't just about footwork. It's about trust. You have to let go." Aiden knew she was right. But how the hell was he supposed to let go? Feeling defeated, he trudged back home, vowing to throw in the towel. That was until Malcolm knocked on his door that evening. Aiden opened it to find his neighbor leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, his usual smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Heard you signed up for dance classes," Malcolm said casually. Aiden groaned. "How did you?" "Liv." "Of course she told you," Malcolm chuckled. "So, how was it?" Aiden sighed. "Let's just say I wasn't graceful." Malcolm studied him for a beat, then without preamble said, "I could teach you." Aiden blinked. "You?" Malcolm pushed off the doorframe. "I did ballroom for years when I was younger." "You what?" Malcolm smirked. "I know. Shocking. But yeah, I competed. My mom made me take lessons, and turns out I was good at it." His voice was light, but there was something in his expression, something a little distant. Aiden crossed his arms. "And you just happened to not mention this." Malcolm shrugged. "You never asked." Aiden narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying you'd actually be willing to help me?" Malcolm leaned slightly closer, his dark eyes glinting. "Depends. Are you ready for brutal honesty?" Aiden straightened. "I can take it." Malcolm grinned. "All right, then." Aiden regretted everything immediately. In the middle of his tiny living room, Malcolm stood in front of him, arms crossed, looking entirely too amused as Aiden fumbled through the first few steps. "Relax your shoulders." Malcolm instructed. I am relaxed, Aiden gritted out. Malcolm arched a brow. You look like you're waiting to get punched. Aiden scowled but tried to loosen up. Malcolm stepped forward, gripping Aiden's hands with firm confidence. His touch was warm, grounding. All right, basic hold, Malcolm said. Left hand on my shoulder, right hand in mine. Good. Now trust me and follow my lead. Trust, right. That was easy to say when you weren't the one constantly messing up. Malcolm guided him gently into the first step. Aiden stepped too late, then too early, then directly onto Malcolm's foot. Malcolm winced, but didn't pull away. Aiden groaned. This is a disaster. Malcolm chuckled. It's your first try. I took a class already. I still sucked. Malcolm studied him for a moment. Then, in a tone far softer than before, he asked, Why are you so tense about this? Aiden hesitated. He didn't want to answer, but Malcolm just stood there, waiting, like he could see right through Aiden's defenses. Finally, Aiden muttered, Julian told me I was terrible. Malcolm's expression darkened. Let me guess. He didn't try to teach you, did he? Aiden shook his head. Malcolm sighed. You're not bad, Aiden. You're just in your own head. Aiden exhaled, trying to shake off the old voices whispering in his ear. He looked up at Malcolm, really looked at him, the way he held himself, the ease in his movements. Something about Malcolm felt safe. Again, Aiden said, this time with determination. Malcolm grinned. That's the spirit. They started again. This time, Aiden focused less on getting it right and more on the feel of it. Malcolm's presence was steady, his grip firm but not overbearing. Slowly, Aiden fell into rhythm. After a few more tries, Malcolm twirled him, successfully. Aiden laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh. Holy shit, I did it, Malcolm smirked. See? Not hopeless. The night stretched on, filled with more stumbles and curses, but also laughter. At some point, they collapsed onto the floor, breathless, their backs resting against the couch. Aiden turned his head slightly, watching Malcolm. Why'd you stop? Malcolm blinked. Stop what? Dancing. For a moment, Malcolm didn't answer. Then, quietly, he said, Someone made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Aiden frowned. They were wrong. Malcolm's gaze met his, something shifting there, something unspoken. The air between them changed. Neither of them moved, but Aiden was suddenly very aware of how close they were, of the way Malcolm's fingers rested lightly on the floor between them, just inches from his own. It would be so easy to close the gap. Malcolm's eyes flickered to Aiden's lips, just briefly. Aiden's heart stuttered. But then, he pulled back. Clearing his throat, he forced a smile. I should probably get some sleep. Malcolm hesitated for half a second before nodding. Yeah, same. He pushed himself up, offering Aiden a hand. Aiden took it, the warmth lingering as Malcolm helped him to his feet. For a moment they just stood there. Then Malcolm smirked. For the record, you're not a terrible dancer. Aiden rolled his eyes. Flattery will get you nowhere. Malcolm grinned, heading toward the door. We'll see about that. As the door shut behind him, Aiden let out a breath. His heart was still racing. He told himself it was just from the dancing. Chapter 3. A road trip, a rainstorm, and a shared bed. It started, as most of Aiden's bad ideas did, with Liv. You, she announced, jabbing a finger at his chest, are the least spontaneous person I know. Aiden, stretched out on her couch, frowned. That's unfair. I'm very spontaneous. Liv snorted. Name one time. Aiden opened his mouth, then hesitated. Liv raised an eyebrow. Aiden groaned. Fine. I like plans, okay? What's so wrong with knowing what's coming? Liv smirked, digging around in her bag before pulling out a set of car keys. All right, Mr. Predictable. Prove me wrong. Let's go on a road trip. Right now. No planning, no itinerary, just drive. Aiden sat up. What? That's insane. Is it? Liv dangled the keys. Or are you just scared? Aiden scowled. I hate you. You love me. Before Aiden could launch a counterattack, another voice joined in. Sounds like a solid challenge. Aiden turned to see Malcolm standing in the doorway, arms crossed, clearly amused by the entire exchange. Do you just appear whenever I'm about to make a questionable decision? Aiden asked. Malcolm shrugged. I have excellent timing. Liv tossed him the keys. You in? Malcolm caught them effortlessly, grinning. Sure, why not? Aiden blinked. Wait, you're actually coming? Malcolm smirked. Unless you're scared. Aiden shot Liv a glare. I really hate you. Liv just beamed. Have fun, lovebirds. 3 hours into the drive, Aiden was still questioning how he got here. The road stretched endlessly ahead of them, lined with towering trees and the occasional gas station that looked like the setting of a horror movie. Malcolm in the driver's seat seemed perfectly at ease, one hand on the wheel, the other casually drumming against his thigh. The rolled-up sleeves of his sweater revealed strong forearms, and Aiden did not let his eyes linger. "This isn't so bad, right?" Malcolm asked, glancing over. Aiden huffed. "I'm very spontaneous." Malcolm snorted. "Sure. That's why you brought a travel itinerary." "I like to be prepared." Malcolm grinned. "Relax, Aiden. The world won't end if you let go a little." Aiden sighed, but before he could respond, the first drops of rain splattered against the windshield. Malcolm frowned. That was fast. Within minutes, the rain intensified, turning into a full-fledged downpour. The wipers struggled against the sheets of water, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. "We should probably stop," Aiden said, leaning forward. Malcolm nodded. "There's a sign for an inn up ahead." By the time they stumbled into the tiny roadside inn, they were both soaked. The front desk clerk, an older woman with a kind smile, greeted them. "Rough night for a drive." "You have no idea," Aiden muttered, shaking out his dripping jacket. The woman glanced at the ancient computer. "You're in luck. 1 room left." Aiden stilled. 1. Malcolm didn't even hesitate. "We'll take it." Aiden turned to him, alarmed. "We will?" Malcolm smirked. "Unless you want to sleep in the car?" Aiden huffed. "Fine." The room was small, like absurdly small, and true to their luck, there was only 1 bed. Aiden groaned, rubbing his temples. "Of course." Malcolm tossed his jacket onto a chair. "You take the bed, I'll take the floor." Aiden frowned. "No, that's not fair. We can share." Malcolm arched an eyebrow. "You sure?" Aiden's pride wouldn't let him back down. "I'm not scared of sharing a bed, Malcolm." Malcolm's smirk was annoyingly smug. "All right, then." Later, as the storm raged outside, Aiden lay stiffly on his side of the bed, very aware of Malcolm's presence next to him. The room was dark, but he could hear Malcolm's steady breathing. After a long moment, Malcolm spoke. "My ex left me once." His voice was quiet, but there was something in it. Something heavy. Aiden blinked. "What?" Malcolm exhaled. "I was in a long-term relationship. We had plans. I thought we were solid. Then, when things got difficult, he just left." Aiden turned slightly. "I didn't know." Malcolm let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not something I bring up often." Aiden hesitated. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he murmured, "I don't think you're hard to love." Silence. Aiden's heart pounded. Had he said too much? But then, Malcolm shifted slightly, his voice softer this time. "Get some sleep, Aiden." Aiden closed his eyes, but Malcolm's presence lingered in his thoughts long after sleep took him. Chapter 4. Facing Fears and Almost Losing Everything. Aiden stared at the job application on his laptop screen. The blinking cursor taunted him, a silent dare. "You never took risks." Julian's words had been a cruel, parting shot, one Aiden had carried like a stone in his chest. But now, as he hovered over the submit button for a creative project manager position at a top-tier design firm, he realized something. Julian had been wrong. The past few weeks had been nothing but risks. Dancing, road trips, stormy nights spent beside Malcolm, things he never would have done before. He inhaled sharply and clicked submit before he could overthink it. The moment the confirmation email appeared, his phone buzzed. "Malcolm, dinner. My place. Don't say no." Aiden smirked. Typical Malcolm, demanding without asking, but somehow Aiden didn't mind. He grabbed his keys, a nervous energy bubbling inside him. Malcolm's apartment smelled like garlic and something deliciously savory when Aiden stepped inside. "You cooked?" Aiden teased, eyeing the plates on the counter. Malcolm smirked. "I ordered and put it on plates. That counts." Aiden snorted, shaking his head as he helped set the table. Halfway through dinner, Malcolm leaned back, studying him. "You seem different." Aiden raised a brow. "Good different?" Malcolm's lips quirked. "Yeah, like you finally believe in yourself." Aiden felt heat rise to his cheeks. I applied for that job." Malcolm grinned. "That job? The one you thought you had no chance at?" Aiden nodded. "Yeah." Malcolm's smile softened, something warm and proud behind his eyes. "Good. You deserve it." Aiden felt his chest tighten. Malcolm always said things like that with certainty, like it was an undeniable fact. "Enough about me," Aiden said, clearing his throat. "How's the business stuff going?" Malcolm exhaled. "Messy." Aiden frowned. "That bad?" Malcolm dragged a hand through his hair. My ex-business partner, Derek, is trying to tank my expansion deal. He's spreading rumors, making investors nervous. Aiden clenched his fists. That's insane. Malcolm sighed. It's business. People play dirty. Aiden shook his head. Not you. You built your company honestly. Malcolm smirked, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, well, honesty doesn't always win in boardrooms. Aiden hesitated, then reached out, resting his hand on Malcolm's wrist. You'll figure it out. You always do. Malcolm stilled, staring at their hands. Something in his expression shifted, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. Then his phone rang. Malcolm cursed. It's an investor. I have to take this. Aiden nodded, but as Malcolm stepped away, a pit settled in his stomach. The next day, Aiden found himself at a corporate event, one Malcolm had to attend to salvage his deal. He wasn't sure why he came. Maybe it was because Malcolm had looked tired last night. Maybe it was because Aiden was done sitting on the sidelines, watching people like Julian or Derek dictate what he could or couldn't do. The event was sleek and polished, everything Aiden hated. He spotted Malcolm across the room, speaking to a group of sharply dressed executives. And then Derek walked in. Aiden didn't know him personally, but he recognized the type. Slick, self-important, the kind of guy who smiled while twisting a knife in your back. He watched as Derek approached Malcolm, a smirk on his face. The conversation started civil, but Aiden saw the shift in Malcolm's expression. Then Derek turned to the investors. Look, I'm just saying, Malcolm's a great guy, but risky. He's been reckless with decisions lately, taking chances that might not pay off. Aiden saw red. Before he could think better of it, he stepped forward. That's funny, he said, voice carrying through the small crowd. Because from what I've seen, Malcolm's the only reason this business is still standing after you left. Derek's smirk faltered. And you are? Aiden crossed his arms. Someone who actually knows what he's talking about. The investors glanced at each other, intrigued. Aiden turned to them. Malcolm's not risky. He's smart. He takes calculated chances. That's what makes him better than people like Derek, who play it safe and expect the world to hand them success. Silence. Then one of the investors nodded. That's actually a good point. Malcolm stared at Aiden, expression unreadable. Derek, visibly irritated, muttered something under his breath and stalked off. As the tension eased, Malcolm's hand found Aiden's wrist, pulling him aside. What the hell was that? Malcolm asked, his voice low. Aiden frowned. I was helping, Malcolm exhaled, rubbing his jaw. You didn't have to. Aiden huffed. Yes, I did. Malcolm studied him for a moment, something flickering behind his eyes. Then, before he could say anything else, Aiden. A voice Aiden hadn't wanted to hear again. He turned. Julian stood there, dressed impeccably as ever, looking at Aiden like he was something Julian had graciously decided to acknowledge. Aiden's stomach churned. I heard about your little speech, Julian said, tone dripping with amusement. Didn't know you had that in you. Aiden clenched his jaw. What do you want, Julian? Julian sighed, feigning disappointment. Aiden, don't be like that. I missed you. Aiden blinked. Malcolm stiffened beside him. Julian continued, stepping closer. I've been thinking, and maybe I was too harsh. We had something real, didn't we? Aiden laughed, a short, sharp sound. You dumped me, publicly, and left me a list of all the ways I wasn't good enough. Julian had the audacity to look sheepish. That was harsh. Aiden crossed his arms. Yeah, no shit. Julian exhaled. Look, maybe we could talk, catch up, see where things go. Aiden opened his mouth to tell Julian exactly where he could shove his fake regret, but Malcolm stepped back. Aiden turned, frowning. Malcolm's expression was unreadable, his usual confidence dimmed. I should go. Aiden's stomach dropped. What? Why? Malcolm hesitated, then sighed. I don't want to be a rebound, Aiden. Aiden's breath caught. Malcolm. But Malcolm shook his head. Figure out what you really want. Then he walked away. And for the first time since this whole ridiculous journey began, Aiden panicked. Not because of Julian, but because Malcolm was slipping through his fingers. And he wasn't sure how to stop it. Chapter 5. A Grand Gesture and a Realization. Aiden stared at the final line on the list. You never fought for anything worth having. It had been written with Julian's signature arrogance, a smug reminder of all the ways Aiden had supposedly failed. But as Aiden reread it, something inside him shifted, because for the first time he realized Julian was right. Not in the way Julian had meant, of course. But Aiden had spent years letting life happen to him, letting people like Julian dictate who he was, what he could or couldn't do. Not this time. Not when it came to Malcolm. He had spent weeks changing, proving to himself that he was capable of more. But now, standing in the wreckage of a near kiss and Malcolm's devastating words, "Figure out what you really want," he realized the truth. He wanted Malcolm. And if Malcolm thought Aiden was just going to let him walk away, then he clearly hadn't been paying attention. Aiden took a deep breath, pulled out his phone, and sent a single text. "Aiden, I need your help. It's an emergency." "Did you finally kill Julian? Because I've been waiting for this moment," Aiden snorted. "Not quite, but I need to do something ridiculous." Liv's reply came instantly. "Say no more, I'm in." The plan came together alarmingly fast. Aiden enlisted everyone, Liv, of course, but also Malcolm's sassy assistant, Renee, who had been suspiciously invested in their relationship for weeks, and Marcus, the chaotic barista from their neighborhood cafe. Even the retired bookstore owner, Mr. Patel, who had been slipping Aiden knowing looks ever since he and Malcolm started dancing around each other, was involved. It was a mess, and Aiden had never been prouder. The flash mob. The restaurant was packed. Malcolm was in the middle of a business meeting, an important one by the looks of it. His posture was stiff, his jaw tight. Aiden could tell he was still tense from their last conversation, still convinced Aiden was stuck in the past. That was about to change, because suddenly the speakers blasted music. Malcolm blinked, confused, as a group of very uncoordinated dancers took center stage, including Marcus, who promptly knocked over a chair in his enthusiasm. Then Aiden stepped forward. Dressed ridiculously in a button-down that screamed, "I'm trying too hard," Aiden threw himself into the most dramatic dance routine the world had ever seen. Malcolm froze. The restaurant erupted in laughter. Aiden spun, dipped, and executed what he was pretty sure was a jazz square. He almost tripped over his own feet, but Liv, bless her, kept him upright. Malcolm was staring at him, utterly dumbfounded. Then, as the music faded, Aiden grabbed the microphone. Aiden, still breathless from dancing, took center stage. "Okay," he said, voice carrying through the restaurant. "I know this is ridiculous, but, so am I. Which is something I've been trying really hard to fight against, but honestly, screw that. I like who I am, and the only person who ever made me feel like that was you." Malcolm's expression softened. Aiden licked his lips, heart pounding. "I spent so long letting people tell me who I was, what I could and couldn't do, and for a while, I thought they were right. But then you showed up, and suddenly I was doing things I never thought I could." He exhaled, shaking his head. "I danced. I took a road trip. I stood up for something that mattered. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." A sharp inhale from Malcolm. The entire restaurant went silent. Aiden swallowed. "I know I'm late to this realization, and maybe I don't deserve another chance. But I'm fighting for this. For us, because I refuse to let go of something worth having." A beat of silence. Then Malcolm stood. "The kiss." "You're ridiculous," Malcolm muttered. Aiden barely had time to process before Malcolm was pulling him in by his shirt, crashing their lips together. It wasn't a soft, tentative kiss. It was desperate, relieved, inevitable. Aiden melted, gripping Malcolm's jacket, as Malcolm's hands held him like he wasn't planning to let go. The restaurant exploded into applause. Marcus cheered. Liv whistled. Renee wiped away a fake tear. When they finally pulled apart, Malcolm rested his forehead against Aiden's, exhaling shakily. "You love me?" he murmured. Aiden smiled. "Yeah, I do." Malcolm's eyes softened. "Good." Then he kissed him again. Chapter 6. Love is not a checklist, it's a choice. The list burned fast. Aiden watched as the flames licked over the edges of the paper, curling and blackening the words Julian had once weaponized against him. You never took risks. You were never spontaneous. You never fought for anything worth having. The last remnants of Julian's voice turned to ash in the fireplace, and Aiden felt lighter. Not in the dramatic, movie-worthy way where everything suddenly made sense, but in a way that felt real. Malcolm leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching with an amused expression. "Therapeutic?" Aiden turned to him, smirking. "Extremely." Malcolm chuckled, pushing away from the counter. "Good, because I'm kidnapping you for the weekend." Aiden blinked. I what? Malcolm grabbed his keys and tossed Aiden a jacket. Get in the car. The drive was peaceful. Malcolm didn't tell him where they were going, only that he'd know when they got there. Aiden had learned to stop questioning Malcolm's plans, though he was still mildly suspicious. 2 hours later, they pulled up to a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods. Aiden stepped out, taking in the crisp air, the way the towering trees cocooned them in a bubble of quiet. Malcolm walked past him, unlocking the cabin door. You coming? Aiden swallowed, suddenly aware of how alone they were. This wasn't like before. The dance lessons, the road trip, even the grand gesture in the restaurant, those had been moments, building blocks stacked between them. But now, standing here in the soft glow of the porch light, Aiden felt the weight of what this really was. A choice. Not one born of impulse or revenge or proving a point. Just a choice to be with Malcolm. His chest tightened in the best way. Aiden stepped inside. The cabin was cozy, warmed by the crackling fireplace Malcolm had started. Dinner had been easy. Wine, takeout, the kind of relaxed meal where they could sit close without needing an excuse. They talked about nothing and everything. At one point, Malcolm leaned back, a lazy smile on his face. You know, when I first met you, I didn't think you'd actually go through with the list. Aiden snorted. Neither did I. Malcolm tilted his head, studying him. Do you regret it? Aiden thought for a moment. Then, honestly, no, because it led me here. Malcolm's smile softened. The silence stretched between them, charged but not uncomfortable. Aiden's gaze flickered down to Malcolm's lips, and he knew. This was the moment. No tension, no hesitation, just the quiet certainty that he wanted this. He leaned in first. Malcolm met him halfway. The kiss started slow, a quiet exploration, before deepening into something undeniable. Aiden sighed against Malcolm's lips, tilting his head to let Malcolm's hands slide against his jaw, his neck, pulling him impossibly closer. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was real. Malcolm's hands traced gentle patterns down Aiden's back, grounding him in the moment, in them. Aiden pulled back just enough to whisper, I don't want to be anywhere else. Malcolm exhaled, pressing their foreheads together. Good, because I'm not letting you go. They didn't leave the cabin the entire weekend. By the time they returned home, something had changed between them. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the kind of way where Aiden reached for Malcolm's hand without thinking, where Malcolm would brush his knuckles against Aiden's back when they passed each other. Everything felt easy. And Aiden had never had easy before. He was sitting on Malcolm's couch one evening when Malcolm disappeared into his office, returning with something wrapped in brown paper. Malcolm handed it to him, looking almost shy. I made you something. Aiden raised a brow but started unwrapping it. His breath caught. It was a framed piece of paper. At the top, in Malcolm's neat handwriting, was the title, Things You've Done Perfectly. Aiden swallowed, heart pounding as he read through the list. You took risks. You danced. Terribly, but you tried. You were spontaneous. You fought for something worth having. And at the very bottom, the last line hit him like a punch to the chest. Loving me. Aiden barely realized he was tearing up until Malcolm chuckled softly, brushing a thumb against Aiden's cheek. You're crying, Malcolm murmured. Aiden sniffed. Shut up. Malcolm leaned in, kissing him gently. Never. Aiden smiled against Malcolm's lips, feeling, for the first time in his life, like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Epilogue. Love is the only list that matters. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and amber. Aiden stood on Malcolm's balcony, a steaming mug of tea in his hands, watching the skyline shift as the day melted into evening. It had been 6 months. 6 months since he'd burned that damned list. 6 months since he'd chosen Malcolm. Not out of desperation, not to prove something, but simply because he wanted to. Malcolm stepped out onto the balcony, his arms sliding easily around Aiden's waist. He pressed a kiss to the back of Aiden's neck, his scruff tickling the sensitive skin there. You're brooding, Aiden snorted. I'm reflecting. Malcolm hummed against his skin. Dangerous, Aiden sighed, leaning back into him. I was just thinking about how much has changed. Malcolm tightened his hold slightly. Good changes, I hope? Aiden turned, looping his arms around Malcolm's neck. Mostly. Malcolm arched an eyebrow. Mostly? Aiden grinned. You still don't let me pick the music in the car. Malcolm laughed. Because you have terrible taste. Aiden gasped dramatically. Excuse you, 90s pop classics are timeless. Malcolm rolled his eyes but kissed him anyway. You're impossible. Aiden grinned. And yet, here you are. Malcolm huffed, nudging their noses together. Yeah, here I am. The warmth in his voice made Aiden's chest tighten, because that was the thing about love. It wasn't about grand gestures or checklists. It was the quiet moments, the teasing, the laughter, the way Malcolm pulled him closer without thinking. It was Malcolm reaching for his hand at grocery stores, Aiden stealing Malcolm's sweaters despite having his own, the way their world had settled into something effortless and real. It was waking up each morning and choosing each other, over and over again. Aiden pressed a kiss to Malcolm's lips, smiling against them. Let's make a new list, he murmured. Malcolm smirked. Of what? Aiden leaned into him, voice soft but sure. Everything we still have left to do together.